Today, we're talking with Air Force veteran Donald Prentiss, CEO of Qualthera. Donald, great having you here on the show. A lot of good things to talk about. I do like to start off going back and tell us what you did in the Air Force.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. And thank you, Joe, for creating this platform that creates a lot of useful material for veterans across the country. So thank you
Yeah.
as well. But yeah, just taking a look back at my military journey. So I was a medical laboratory generalist in the Air Force. And so what that means basically, I was the guy who drew your blood or processed any of the fluids or parts that came off of your body, right? And so I worked in chemistry, microbiology, blood banking, hematology, urinalysis, you name it, anything that came out of the body that was about the body, we help analyze those specimens so that way doctors can make decisions or also assess people prior to deployment for certain markers that they would look for in the blood to make sure that they were ready to deploy as well. So I did that on active duty for roughly 3.5 years. During the time I was in, Palace Chase was a program where they were allowing active duty to transition to the reserves to finish out their contracts on a 2-for-1 basis, and so I ended up doing about 5 years as a reserve, same thing as a medical laboratory generalist. So joined to see the world and mainly spent a lot of time in Lackland, down in San Antonio, Shepherd Air Force Base, in Wichita Falls, Biloxi, Mississippi, down there on the coast, and back to Shepherd, and then wrapped up at Tinker Air Force Base. A couple TDYs here and there, but most of my time here domestically.
Yeah. So, what was your transition like? Did it come as a surprise? Were you fully prepared? Tell us about your transition.
Yeah, I think I really thought I had it all figured out, right? I still remember that conversation with my supervisor. I still remember sitting there in the lab, and he asked me point blank, what are you going to do for money? He was on track for 20 years. That's what a lot of people do for really good reason because the benefits are amazing, and it's just a good way of life, a good way to go about and carry out your career progression. And so, but for me, I had the itch to kind of go out and explore other options out there. And so when that opportunity came up, I jumped for it. And so the transition, again, because I had it all figured out in my head, it was going to be so easy. Wasn't necessarily easy. I
Never
ended up
is.
on my right. I ended up on my parents' couch fairly quickly, but I still had kind of this yearning to get off the couch and to go find a job and to get going. They were doing everything they could to keep me at home. We love you. We'll stay here, save your money. But I didn't want to hear that, right? And I think that's really where the pride set in. It's like, no, I can't do this. I'm better than this. I'm a Air Force veteran. Like I have too much to offer. But again, it was all kind of in my head, and I wasn't really putting a lot to action. So it wasn't until I actually got out there, started making moves, putting the resumes out, that I really started to gain traction and executed on that. So yes, I think that definitely thankful for my parents for willing to give me a cover there, but it also ironically kind of catapulted me into a civilian world.
Yeah. So, what were some of the first? What'd you end up doing your first couple of civilian jobs?
Yeah, so I continued on with the same training I got in the Air Force. So I was worked in a couple of labs. So I worked at a large family practice clinic and also in some small hospitals in the North Texas area. Migrated over to medical device, and then eventually made my way to a fairly large reference laboratory that essentially did everything that I did, but thousands and thousands of patients a night. So there's only a few of those in the country. So that was a unique experience. Navigated through quality assurance, compliance positions, worked my way up through management, kind of leveraging the military experience that I had, and finished up in operations before I then again thought I had it all figured out and went and started my own laboratory. And so I made that jump. That's my first kind of real entrepreneurial jump. Everything was going really well. We set the lab up. I got the license. I had a medical doctor as my medical director. Uh, but there's one thing that I didn't have figured out, and that was revenue cycle management, right? And so I needed that insurance to come in, and I didn't account for that float that typically happens from when you run the test to when you get reimbursed. And so quick, I used all my money, didn't take out any debt, and so I all that dried up, and I was back on the job hunt again. And but again, just keep moving forward. Not staying still. I looked for another opportunity and was fortunate to be able to find a job with my previous employer to where I got to oversee a large esoteric laboratory, which was pretty neat.
What's an esoteric laboratory?
Yeah, so essentially, instead of the run-of-the-mill stuff that I kind of mentioned before, urinalysis, basic blood tests, they ran what was called pharmacogenetic testing. So they would look at they would take a sample, saliva sample, and then look at the DNA material to see how you would metabolize drugs. Because Joe, you might, burn through a medication faster than me, depending on your genetic makeup. And so that doctor can then give you a safer dose to start off with. So it's pretty unique.
Interesting. And so, where did the entrepreneurial idea come from? You're working in a lab. I mean, you're like that book, The Entrepreneurial Myth. Like you're making widgets, and you're like, oh, I can make these widgets better myself.
Yeah.
So you start your own company. Now I'm going to make widgets, but you find out, oh, now I'm running a business. I don't really make
Hmm.
widgets anymore. I run a business that makes widgets, and all
Hmm.
I really wanted to do is keep making widgets myself.
Absolutely. That's spot on. I think the key takeaway there is that I had to learn what I didn't know, right? And so as I kind of went through this process, and kind of fast forward to the pharmaceutical industry, which I'm in now, I was able to transition over to overseeing their pharmacy division that my previous employer had, and that whole world really resonated with me because of the patient collaboration, just really dialing in that kind of precision care, which we'll get to in a moment, compounding. And so how I was able to kind of come up with this new widget was, now I got the business aspect. I completed my degree in business administration, so I learned a lot about finance that I didn't know before, how to manage the books, how to keep people honest who were managing those books as well. So coupled that with my operational experience, my compliance, plus all the mistakes that I made, and said, okay, well, instead of maybe going from ground up, why don't I look for an opportunity that's already cash flowing, right? Something that's already running, and then I can layer in my expertise to help it scale, similar to what I've done in the past.
Yeah. So did you end up buying a lab?
So no, actually, I ended up buying a lab of sorts, but a compounding laboratory. So it's a Central Drug was the acquisition that we made. So I created a new company called Qualthera to purchase this already existing compounding pharmacy called Central Drug in Texas, and that's what we're working on expanding at this point in time.
Yeah. Um, do you mind me asking, like, how were you able to afford buying the lab? Did you like go through the SBA, or did the veteran status help at all in that?
Absolutely. Veteran status definitely helped. And yes, it was an SBA loan. So I had to use my savings to create the equity injection. And so that's the other thing I would encourage your listeners to do is to save early. We hear it all the time, but
Yeah.
it definitely paid dividends for me. Otherwise, I likely wouldn't have been able to take down this target had I not had those to bring to the table. But absolutely, yeah, the SBA was there. And then also that veteran status, hands down, definitely was a contributing factor.
What did the veteran status do? I know at one point, I don't know if they're always doing it, but with the SBA loan, typically SBA will give you 80% of the money and you got to come up with the other 20%. But I think at one point that if you were a veteran or a certain kind of veteran or a certain
Mhm.
disability rating, I don't know what it was, but maybe just veteran,
Mhm.
you get the 20% reduced to 10. What was your experience?
Yeah, I was closer to the 80% range
Okay.
on that one for sure. And then you also save on a lot of the fees too,
Mm,
that having the veteran status as well.
okay. That's cool.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So the SBA knows that uh, the other 80/20 is 80% of currently successful businesses will remain successful.
Hmm. Yeah,
80% of brand new businesses will fail.
yeah, yeah. So
So,
far,
yeah, buying a current cash flowing business, like you said, if you can find one that's will, and of
hmm.
course, everybody said every business is for sale, but
Right,
a lot of
right,
the
right.
owners don't want to put it up for sale because they don't want their employees to know they're looking to get out. So,
Exactly,
but
exactly.
there's a lot of good things going on there with trying to infuse veterans into a lot of these businesses that are successful and cash flowing,
Hmm.
turning them over to the next generation, really. Um,
Yeah.
so now you have your own compounding pharmacy, and I've had a little bit of experience with compounding pharmacy,
Hmm.
personal life. Like, my wife several years ago, first time I'd ever heard of it, like she had to take a prescription to a compounding pharmacy, and they had to make
Hmm.
it. I'm like, Isn't that
Right.
interesting, huh? And I remember
Hmm.
going to the place one time. It's just kind of a normal office, but
Right.
it was the first. So talk to us about like what's going on with the is are compound pharmacies, are they actually on the rise these days, or am I just kind of becoming aware of them because I never used to hear about them, but it seems like I've been hearing about compounding pharmacies quite a bit lately.
Yeah, so that's a big question. I think in general, I mean, most, I think, if not all, medication was essentially compounded back in the day, right? When you go back to your soda fountains and candy bars, next to the pharmacist, when I think Dr. Pepper was created by a pharmacist. So from those humble beginnings, I mean, essentially the act of compounding was there since the beginning. And it's not until kind of recently that, relatively speaking, that you see, the Walgreens and the CVSs of the world really consolidate around the commercially available products that are FDA approved, mass produced, right? So
Mhm.
compounding's always kind of been there. And I think we're seeing what I would call a resurgence of compounding, but most people are like you, Joe. They really don't know what it is until they need it, right? They don't just kind
Yeah.
of hear about it in passing by. But we are seeing more awareness about it, both good and bad. So back in 2012, I believe it was, the New England Compounding Center, was failing to follow best practices for compounding, and it resulted in multiple deaths, unfortunately, thousands of others injured. And so that actually created, law to where now these types of pharmacies that want to make sterile drug product in bulk have to be regulated by the FDA. There's a voluntary registration, inspection cycle, all that good stuff. So we're seeing more regulatory pressure because of that issue, but we're also seeing other folks, what I call channel partners, that see the opportunity to bring compounding to the masses. We're seeing like the Hims and the Hers out there, the Rose of the world. They are using compounds largely to provide patients with these medications that you're seeing. Um, but with that comes also kind of a tug and pull with, those that have the FDA approved versions of those drugs. So in a perfect world, the way that it should be, the way that Qualthera operates is that if a drug is on shortage, meaning that the drug manufacturers can't keep up with demand, can't supply it, then you can make a one-to-one copy, so a 5 milligram of XYZ. However, if it's not on shortage, which there's a published list, then you're only allowed to make a certain version of it specific to a doctor's request to Joe's needs, right? So Joe can't take it in tablet form; he needs it in a liquid form or injection or what have you. The FDA approval only has a 10 milligram. Well, Joe needs a 5 milligram, right? So I need to have that compounded. Those are typically the two situations that you would see those, and so I think what we're kind of seeing in a broader sense is this kind of struggle between FDA approved, like case in point, GLP ones, the weight loss drugs that are huge
Yeah.
right now. There's so much demand that the drug manufacturers could keep up with it. So compounders stepped in to fill that gap, right? That's what they're really there for, is to fill the gap. I think it's a good example.
Yeah. And then I guess maybe there are some things that typically you can't get a normal prescription for, just some oddball thing or a combination of
Mhm.
something. And so compounders can actually make that. So, um, and how long ago did you make your acquisition?
Just this past October, actually. So we're fresh out of the acquisition.
Okay. Um, were you able to, were there any big surprises after taking over the business? Still cash flowing like it was advertised and all that?
Absolutely. We're actually growing. We're not sharing any numbers yet, but we are already looking at ways to expand their laboratory. They have some unused space, so I was just down there last week working through some expansion plans with the team. Steve Branch, who is the what's called a pharmacist in charge. Every pharmacy has to have what's called a pharmacist in charge. That's ultimately, responsible for the quality that's carried out at the facility. But he was also the previous owner, and so he's still on board. He's been phenomenal with the transition. I think that definitely makes it easier. You hear a lot of horror stories about acquisitions where the seller just says, "Okay, see you later, good luck." Not the case with Steve. He's been absolutely great to help transition this. We haven't lost anyone employee wise through the transition. The cash flows are up and to the right. It's going really positive.
Yeah. Now, so the seller is still hanging out there on board working for you guys. What was his motivations for doing that, or what was his motivation for selling? I mean, he's still hanging
Mhm.
around, so he really wasn't looking to leave right away.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely is ready to move on to the next chapter of his life into retirement. So that is on the horizon for him, but it's also been his baby for the last 15 years, right? And
Mm.
so he took it over. This pharmacy's actually been around since 1950.
Mm.
Okay, and so it's been there. He wasn't, obviously the owner that long, but it's been moved a couple of times, and he moved to this most recent larger facility, and so he has a lot invested in it, and so I think that's a driving force for him kind of sticking around, definitely to make sure this transition is successful.
Wow, that's awesome. Um,
Mhm.
so what are some of the other things that you've experienced buying somebody else's business?
Yeah, I think number one, it just comes down to making the employees feel comfortable, right? And so I think I must have said it 1,000 times, like nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to change. Like everything is going to stay the same. You're still going to get paid. You're still going to have these, type of benefits. This is the vision, but again, we don't want to rock the boat. And I think once they kind of saw that actually come to fruition, you noticed, more I think openness to talk about their ideas and how excited they are about the future. It was kind of that dead silence, okay, who's this guy? What's he gonna do? Is he gonna change everything? Is he gonna close us? Is he gonna move us? So once they kind of saw, over time that I was consistent with my words and my actions, I believe that that's what really allowed them to kind of flourish. And now I'm getting awesome ideas left and right, and it's been a great ride.
Yeah. Like so with a compounder, like where's the bulk of your business come from?
Yeah, so right now, Central Drug is very local. And so I think roughly 76% of its volume comes from that immediate area,
Mhm.
with some kind of sprinkling out through Texas. And so I've already have open positions for marketers in these large metro areas across Texas, because that's currently where the license is now. But as a pharmacy, you can apply for what's called out of state licenses in other states. And so we already have a roadmap to what other states we want to have licensure in. However, that's not necessarily the strategy for Central Drug or Qualthera. The overarching strategy is to have a store in every state, at least one store in every state, which is fairly ambitious, but it I think addresses the issues that we're kind of seeing at a grand scale, where you have the Walgreens of the world shutting down 8,000 or so pharmacies last I read across the country. You have a lot of independent pharmacies that were on decline because of the upswing in CVS Walgreens. And so I'm going to see over the horizon a large gap that needs to be filled by these independent compounding pharmacies. And I want to be the one to help put the team together to deliver that solution.
Yeah, what do you think the reason for Walgreens and CVS shutting down lots of pharmacies is? Is it something to do with the current model, or what's going on with that?
Yeah, you heard a lot of different opinions on that. I think number one is going to be the reimbursement and what's called PBMs, which are pharmacy benefit managers that are in the middle. That there's been a lot of debate over their usefulness or how much they add to the burden of cost across the industry. But nonetheless, it's just the insurance has been squeezing these independent retail pharmacies, and now I think it's really starting to squeeze these major players as well. Just razor thin margins. They've been able to rely on the in-store purchases typically when you go in. Don't quote me on the data, but there was something like if someone was picking up a script at a Walgreens, they were whatever it was 3 times more likely to buy something in the store too, right? So kind of like that gas station food model where you maybe not a whole bunch of money on the gas, but they're making a lot on the grocery.
Yeah.
But now you have everything shipped to your door same day by pushing a button, so it's less relevant, I would say.
Oh, interesting. And so, how do you fulfill that niche? Whether you're not filling the online niche necessarily, but
Mm-mm.
uh, you're not
Yeah, that's
the Walgreens model. But how are you doing that?
yeah. So we're kind of the opposite. So what you'll see a lot of compounders do today is they'll have this either really big facility. We just took down a 50,000 square foot facility. We're going to ship to all 50 states. And to me, that's a lot of operational risk. That's a lot of compliance risk. If I mess up in Florida by not doing a piece of paperwork right and Texas finds out, they're going to fine you. And then all the other states fine you because you broke those other laws, right? So what I'm doing, which I haven't seen out there, this model is essentially having a store in every state to fulfill the needs of that state, right? So we're not worried about the interstate commerce regulatory risk, but we still get that economies of scale, through purchasing power, be able to leverage the benefits for our employees, things of that nature. Because a lot of independent compounding pharmacies today are very small, very single store locations. serving that immediate area, and so I want to bring that national footprint to the game.
Yeah. Wow. So, what are some of the things? What were some of the things looking back on it after buying a business that maybe you wish you would have known early on? Whether it was be um, the more or less failure of starting your own lab back in the beginning to coming back and recovering and actually buying an existing business.
Yeah, I think for me, it may sound a little corny, but the why, so my why back when I started lab was very different than my why when I bought this business, and so personally for me, when I started the lab, I was single, no one depended on me. I was really doing it to prove that I could do it, have that success to hang on the wall. Money obviously was a motivator because I knew the margins, I knew all the puts and takes there. I knew what I could get. But when I bought this, I have a family, right? I have mouths to feed. I burned the boats, when I quit my job, I had to make this work. And so I think that's another takeaway that I would offer to your audience is that if you're doing it for yourself or for material things, you're going to fail, hands down. In some form or fashion, you're going to fail. I
Yeah.
think if you find a reason to do it for someone else, particularly family, even just your community, right? Anything else other than yourself, I think you have an exponentially higher chance of succeeding.
Wow. That's awesome. Wow.
Mhm.
Um, so if somebody's interested in finding out more about Qualthera, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, you can visit our website at qualthera.com. That's Qualthera.com. You can also visit our first acquisition website, Central Drug, at centraldrug.net. Centraldrug.net.
And are you like actively or here in the near future looking for people to I don't know if it's called like a franchise model, but if you're trying to expand and go into other states, are you looking for people willing to take that on?
Yeah, so we're going to keep everything company owned. That's the model that we're going to roll out.
Mhm.
So far, the cash flow support that type of investment, and so, but absolutely, if anyone's interested in any other state to help, get some boots on the ground, whether it be from a marketing standpoint, surveying, best locations, I could use all the help I can get. So definitely, if you're interested, and you're a veteran or otherwise, please reach out.
Yeah. Speaking of the veteran thing, how much do you think it hurt or helped you having been a veteran going into business for yourself?
So I think it definitely taught me discipline. Even when my why was about me, like I still got up to go to work, on time. To be on time is to be late, to be early is to be on time. Like that always resonated with me.
Yep.
I wasn't making hospital corners at home or anything like that, but there was to show up to work was not an option. Like you had to do it, even when I didn't feel like it.
Right.
So I think the discipline is what really got me through everything, through the good time and the bad, and just keep moving forward, never stop, keep moving forward is the mentality that drove home for me from the military.
That's awesome. Well, hey Donald, getting close to the end here. I do want to give you the last word. So if you're talking to somebody that's in the military, just got out, looking to start their own business, get into entrepreneurship, what kind of advice comes to mind?
Yeah, number one, find your why. That's greater than yourself, absolutely. And then number two, find someone that's already done it. Right. Don't recreate the wheel. Learn from other people's mistakes and failures. I'm happy to be a resource for you. I know Joe has a ton of people he can link you up with. Just reach out. You don't have to do it alone. And trust me, you don't know everything there is to know. Take it from me.
All right. Great advice, man. Great advice. Appreciate it.
Yep,
All right. Well, thanks
absolutely.
for being on the show and sharing your veteran entrepreneurial success story. And man, you're at the beginning of Qualthera, man. We'll have to get you on the show here in another year or two and talk about how far you've come along.
I look forward to it.
All right. Look forward to seeing your future success. These two veterans are Oscar Mike.